All right, I think we are live here. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to a supplemental episode of The Filter. You know, every week we sit down here in Bali in the jungle, in the sweltering heat to talk about Bitcoin. We have that weekly meeting, but in between weekly meetings, we post a bunch of stories to our Facebook group, the Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. And then when we get together in person, we have something to talk about. And well, over the months and now years that we've been doing this, we get a lot of smart people that roll through. And we often have very interesting conversations about the news of the day. But being Bali, it's a little bit transient. And sometimes those really smart people, well, they move on to their other projects, or their vacation is over, or they're just on to other things. But one particularly astute commentator that we've had here recently, but not very recently, is our good friend Andrea. And I've asked Andrea to jump on board and talk about some of the news of the day, like we used to do when we were in the same place. We're not in the same place anymore, but through the magic of the interwebs, we can get together. So let me bring him on board here if I can. Andrea, can you hear me?
Hi, Gary. Nice to speak to you.
Hello, hello. Nice to see you. Where are you these days?
At the moment, I'm in Verona, Italy. I just arrived here about an hour ago.
Ah, Verona, Italy. That's where Romeo and Juliet are from, right?
That is correct. And myself as well.
Ah, and you. Yes.
Thanks for the introduction. Too kind, by the way.
Well, we had a great time when you were in town. I'm glad that you're even after your transcontinental globetrotting, you've still got enough energy here to talk about Bitcoin. So let's do it.
Yeah, I hope I won't drop in and out like a Grandpa Simpson in the middle of a conversation due to the jet lag. I'll do my best.
We can always blame the internet in Bali if anything bad
happens.
All right. Well, where to start? There's, you know, when we were talking before the call started, you're saying that it might be kind of a boring conversation if we had done this like 7 or 10 days ago, but lately things are cooking. Yes. You know, the thing everyone really wants to talk about, at least at first, is the price. And yes, since we all last got together here in Bali, the price has gone up well over 10%. And the big question is why. You have any thoughts on what's going on with the price?
I think it's too early to tell. Normally, when there are price movements, the only reasonable thing to do is to do a post-mortem a few months later. So when the price went up 6 months ago, everybody was speculating about whether it was Chinese buying pressure, the MMM, or whatever it was called, pyramid scheme, whether there was fear of panic of this or that in Argentina, Venezuela, whichever other countries. There were a number of reasons that were being bandied about. It was also the fact that Bitcoin was becoming again more popular thanks to all the front pages on The Economist and I cannot remember which other magazines. And now we know that more or less to simply increase buying pressure on the part of the Chinese. The same seems to be occurring right now in the sense that, as it happened in a while back, the Chinese exchanges normally lead the charge for new price increases, and the Western exchanges simply close in with arbitrage. But there seems to be clear buying pressure on the Asian side from that point of view.
Yeah, there seems to be a bunch of things kind of coalescing to affect the price these days. There's the whole thing about China. I think also the Chinese just devalued their currency, which could have something to do with it. And we've also got the Bitcoin halving coming down the pike, which is a factor, I think, in how people are trading. It's
certainly, yes. But the halving has a very mixed effect on the price, and we might talk about this immediately later because we agreed to talk about the possibility of a catastrophic failure scenario for Bitcoin with the halving. But yes, that is another possibility. Something that I've been reading recently as more or less wild speculation on Reddit is the possibility that there is a cartel between the miners to artificially decrease now the supply of the Bitcoins that enters the market, to artificially, at the moment, give a spur on the price, something that would be very difficult for them to agree on in the long run, but can be agreed upon for several weeks, in the face of an event that could be catastrophic for a large number of them. So these are a number of guys that know that if the price doesn't jump twofold over the next few weeks, much of the operations might have to be shut down or retraced, or that even if they're perfectly successful, players like Endpool or BTCC would find their market share increased in the ecosystem to such extent that would devalue the Bitcoin network, since they would become 40, 45, maybe even 50% of the overall hashing power. This is at the level of the conspiracy plus. Like, it's not that much of a theory, but it's conceivable that for the moment, 4 or 5 players, much like they agreed to get them together in a room a few months ago to discuss scaling proposals, they also have agreed to give a little bump to the Bitcoin price. The price is, yes.
Yeah, well, you know, you mentioned in one of your more astute comments recently on the Bitcoins in Bali group that Bitcoin may have realized its MySpace moment, or jumped the shark, or its best days are behind it. And you know, if the miners are truly able to collude on price at this time, I mean, that doesn't bode very well for Bitcoin, does it? If that collusion on price is possible?
No, but there are a lot of people that are worried that the fact that we have 6 or 7 mining cartels could be a problem for Bitcoin. But many of these people are people that left the ecosystem when this became the case. I could make a few names right now, like James D'Angelo. I'm not sure if I'm naming him correctly. He was very interesting a few years back, and now he kind of lost interest. And he, without making an exit like Mike Hearn, he also claimed that the Bitcoin experiment has probably failed. So yeah, the fact that the number of miners can get together in a room and determine fundamental aspects of how the ecosystem operates is really dramatic. I think it's less of a problem if they do it in terms of fixing the price than it is if they do it in terms of agreeing to fork the network surreptitiously, or change the order of the transaction, which is their main function, to benefit themselves, to fundamentally perform 51% attacks. If they do it simply by limiting the supply of Bitcoin that they put onto the market, they are simply doing that in their capacity as market players, not in their capacity as miners. If they perform a 51% attack, they do that in their capacity as miners. So it's a little more dramatic, but it's still pretty, well, it doesn't bode well for the ecosystem. But for the moment, it might actually be the thing that saves Bitcoin, at least for the short run, if they actually do collude and do fix the price, and they do solve the problem that we might get to talk about in a few minutes' time if you get to it, the problem of the catastrophic failure, the death spiral.
Yes. Well, I think this is as good a time as any to talk about that, and I'll just describe it quickly for the sake of those people that maybe aren't familiar with this doomsday scenario that you're talking about. I mean, essentially what it involves is a very high difficulty level reached at a certain point, then the halving taking place, and a mass defection from the miners who can no longer be profitable at the current hash rate and the current Bitcoin price. If it doesn't double, yet the block reward cuts in half, presumably that will change the profitability of vast swaths of the mining resources. And then if you've got half the people mining with a difficulty that's really at its peak, at Bitcoin's peak difficulty in its entire lifetime, then maybe we never find the next block. Is that the scenario as you understand it?
Yeah, it's very similar. So as you said, the idea is that half of the hashing power goes out of well, it's taken out suddenly or over the course of several hours, but it takes 2 weeks for the difficulty to adjust itself.
Mm-hmm.
But which means that for a space of 2 weeks, blocks would move to 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. On average. 50% went off, 50% of the capacity went offline. But we have a clogged network because we have a 1 megabyte limit for each block, which means that we would fundamentally have a halving of the number of transactions that can be performed. This would be a situational crisis. People would probably try to scramble for the doors. Lots of money that has been deposited in cold storage wallets would come out and try to get into exchanges, but it cannot get into exchanges because the network is working at half capacity. That would probably cause the price to tumble even further. The price tumble even further, more hashing power comes out from the network. More hashing power comes out from the network, and more people scramble to sell. The price goes lower and lower, the block times get longer and longer, and there would be a point where we never again find another block. And that would be the end of it. And that is a problem that is catalyzed by the halving right now, but it is a problem that we only started having since blocks became full. Because when you have full blocks, any circumstance that might cause a significant percentage of the hashing power to drop off the network might trigger this type of scenario. Not necessarily the halving, maybe even just the halving of the price of Bitcoin for whichever reason. Say that China bans Bitcoin tomorrow or in 5 months' time, and quite drastically moves to make it impossible for people to buy and sell and transact with it. And even if it did not shut down the miners, so they kept them in place, that might cause the price of Bitcoin to go up by 50%. If that happened, the same scenario would verify itself that we would see doing any halving. So having a full blocks with unadjustable block size creates this type of catastrophic scenario at any given time if a sufficient amount of the hashing power goes offline. Of course, we don't know how things will play out, but it seems pretty reasonable from a game theory perspective to imagine that this is what would ultimately happen if we had under the circumstances. And the halving is the most perfect, more predictable future event of this event possibly occurring.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I've been reminding people lately of is the last halving. Most people weren't paying attention to Bitcoin the last time we had a halving day, and
yes.
Obviously, obviously the circumstances are different now. But one thing that was interesting, we started off this discussion with price, and in anticipation of the last halving, we did not see a commensurate price increase in the weeks and months leading into the halving day, because there was a lot of uncertainty on what would happen to Bitcoin. I mean, we had never experienced this before. We didn't know how the miners would react. We didn't know how the ecosystem would react. We knew how the code worked, but we didn't know how real people with real Bitcoin and with real mining equipment would react to the halving. And once it was clear that the halving went off without a hitch, that's when we saw a major price increase, orders of magnitude price increase, in within 4 to 6 weeks after the successful halving took place. So if we do weather this storm, if we avoid the death spiral, if mining goes on and Bitcoin survives this halving day, do we see a precipitous rise in the price after the halving?
Personally, I don't think so. Certainly, I do have some Bitcoin, so I would like that to be the case. But I think that the era of significant short-term price swings, like price goes up tenfold over the course of weeks or a couple of months, is over. I would like to be proven wrong, obviously, but that does not seem to be the case. I think there are a number of differences compared to 2012 in the fact that the mining is a lot more like a business right now than it was before, in the hands of specialized entities, which have very often razor-sharp margins. I do not remember 2012 because I was not around, but from what I read, the mining at the time was a lot more a mom-and-pop operation, only that it was something that you did in your dorm at university, or something that could be done with spare graphic cards or maybe the first ASICs. So it was probably less responsive to very fine-tuned market pressures. Another difference is that in 2012, the market capitalization of Bitcoin was very limited, and when you have a very small market capitalization, especially with no traders, no experienced traders, no shorting, no longing, no leverage for trading, it is very easy to have wild price swings, and it is much easier to go from a market cap of $10 million to $100 million than it is to go from $8 billion like right now to $80 billion. I think that if we got to $80 billion, and if there was if we got to a price of $80 billion right now, a very significant amount of the people that hold Bitcoin right now would simply not call it quits, but would say that they have already achieved fuck your money and I can get out into something that is more safe, but they can guarantee their wealth in the long run better than with Bitcoin, which is a very volatile asset, or at least would say that they've gotten what they were in for. So I would find it very difficult to have the price to sustain in the long run. Also, as I mentioned very often to people that hope that the price will increase significantly, very briefly, even with this year, with the coming halving, in order to support a price of, let's say, $10,000 per Bitcoin, which I don't think is attainable for a number of years, there would have to be billions of dollars poured into the ecosystems every day. I cannot do the math right now. I had done it in the past. We know that right now at the price of $450 or $500, whenever we last did the calculation, and with the current block reward, it would have taken, I think, $300 to $400 million a year poured into the ecosystem to keep the price stable. And it would be exponentially more so, or increasingly more so, as the price increases, adding zeros to itself. So if you had the price of, assuming that it takes $400 million to maintain the price stable at the current condition, at the current price point, if we have the block reward, but we increase the price tenfold or 20-fold, it would take $400 million divided by 2 times 10, so $2 billion to maintain the price stable. So it would have to be consistent, constant increased interest in the currency to have to sustain the price. With the current inflation schedule, that is not possible. We still have a very generous block reward, which does not just subsidize mining, but it over-secures the network by a factor of maybe tenfold what would be required to keep things stable right now. So I find it very unlikely that this will remain, that the price will stabilize at a very high level. There might be another bubble, but as it was seen in 2013, eventually the prices would eventually go down. We also have a lot of foresight from the previous bubbles. We have seen that every rapid increase in value in Bitcoin is normally followed by a depreciation that either takes one day, like from when it went from 30 to 1, or that takes around a year from when it went from 1,200 to 200. So the markets are more mature. There's a lot more speculators, very cynical speculators that don't have any reason to believe that Bitcoin will become the new gold standard, new reserve currency.
They're not sentimental like me. They're not sentimental.
Exactly.
Fanatics.
They don't care. It is much easier right now to be a cynical player in the Bitcoin ecosystem than it was 4 years ago. And these people add rationality to the price. They also stabilize it a lot, but they stabilize it a lot in both directions, especially thanks to the presence of leverage, which makes it possible for people that maybe do not want to invest a lot of capital to multiply their, well, if they have more intelligence or more trading skills than they have money, skilled traders can affect the market more than other players thanks to leverage. And a lot of people have been following the ecosystem in the last few years that do just that. And for that reason, I don't think there would be a phenomenal price increase.
Now, of course,
yes.
The wild card in all of this, I mean, I agree with you if we're living in a vacuum.
Yes.
But there is a geopolitical climate, a macro environment that is kind of crazy. Lots of things going on in the world, a lot of geopolitical uncertainty, a lot of currency wars.
Yes.
Major currencies fluctuating wildly against one another, and a lot of uncertainty. I think we mentioned towards the top that China recently devalued their currency in response to some things coming out of the Fed. Janet Yellen making some hawkish remarks in a press conference. And so, yes, I think I don't even know if Bitcoin would be around if it wasn't for the bad behavior of everybody else in the world. And it seems like that bad behavior is coming to a head, but maybe that's just because I'm paying too close attention. What do you think?
I think that I've been waiting for a market downturn for quite a while now, as many people have. I don't think that I'm making very strange prediction when I say that, and you agree with me also. It will probably come. When it comes, it will probably be good for Bitcoin in terms of price, in terms of value. I don't think it will help break Bitcoin into the mainstream in the short term or in the medium term or even in the course of a couple of years. I think that assuming that Bitcoin never became a reserve currency, that it became a hard asset like gold to hold on to in times of crisis, I think that just for the time that institutions take to adapt to novelty or to new things, it would take at least 10 years for that to be the case. I think that if there was another crisis, the pool of people that are interested in the currency, the pool of specialists, or a pool of very wealthy people that are interested in the currency and the experiment and in Bitcoin as an asset would increase, probably significantly, but I don't think there would be a paradigm shift anytime soon. There's nonetheless an undeniable correlation between crisis in the outside world and price in the Bitcoin world.
Yeah.
But I think it has more to do with the consequences of there's a very simple game or a simple scenario in a game theory that goes more or less something like this. You get a crowd of 100 people and you tell them, pick a number from 0 to 100. After you're done picking a number, we will see what is the average number that has been picked, and the number that is 2/3 that will win. So if you play this game with a generic crowd who has never played the game before, most people would say, I don't know, 40 or 35 or 38 or 37. Mm-hmm. And in the end, the winner of the first round would be somewhere around 30 or 25 to 30. But then if you play the game again, for the second round, the winner is around 16. And if you play the game again, the winner is a 7 or 8 or 9. So the more you play this game, the more people learn how to guess each other's responses to reactions. So I think that the response that Bitcoin has to the Bitcoin price has to troubles in the outside world has a lot to do with exactly this. So having learned that the people buy when they hear bad news, other people try to buy also when they hear bad news, trying to capitalize on that. Whether the price increase remains over time or not is not certain. It seems to remain there to some extent. They don't sell immediately after the bad news is gone.
So what you're saying is when we enter into this death spiral, there's going to be plenty of people to buy my Bitcoin from me, before the whole thing tanks.
No, I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to tank. I'm saying that there's a correlation between the negative events in the markets and Bitcoin price. But I don't think it has to do with the fact that that more value flows into Bitcoin as a long-term longevity consideration about what's the best thing to do with my money on the part of a large group of people, but based on the expectations that the Bitcoin price will go up before catastrophes or before the Katrina 2 or before the next financial crisis.
Right.
The long run, it might actually, as in, if Bitcoin ever became successful as a reserve currency, which I honestly, I'm not sure if it will, and it might. I wouldn't put my money on it, but I think it will become a currency of the internet if it succeeds in going past certain stumbling blocks. It might be that in a scenario that I don't find very interesting right now, because I'm more interested in Bitcoin as a technology than as a currency. In a future scenario, it might actually be the case that in the same way in which gold goes up when the markets go down, Bitcoin will go up directly as markets go down, not as a second, third, fourth degree consideration upon what other people are going to be doing very soon, but simply based on the fact that they do believe that that is a good asset, and that large groups of people will believe that that is a good asset. So yeah, I think that there will be more financial trouble before the end of the year, and if there will be more financial trouble, if there was more financial trouble, and if Bitcoin will be still around, Bitcoin will certainly benefit from that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all good analysis, just like I expected. But I don't want to take up the whole time we have together without bringing up, well, hedging our bets a little bit on the whole Bitcoin bust and talking a little bit about the topic of the day. You can't really ignore it. It's all over the place, this thing called the Dow. For those at home that may not know what the Dow is, I'll just try and give a brief description. I don't even think I understand it all that well, but from what I do understand, it's, well, that
I don't understand all that well. I don't understand it all that well either, to be honest. Like, I have a limited understanding of it.
It's a new thing. Even if you do understand the technology, I don't think we can even hope to understand the social implications, and that's actually the fun stuff to discuss. But for the sake of folks at home that haven't taken a look at this yet, the DAO, it's DAO, stands for Distributed Autonomous Organization. It is a computer program that runs autonomously on the Ethereum network, and has embodied a set of rules that makes it act like a virtual venture capital firm. During an initial public offering period, people could exchange Ethereum, which is another cryptocurrency besides Bitcoin, could exchange Ethereum for DAO tokens, which become voting rights in a new organization, a new type of organization that will fund future projects based on how people vote. How does that sound for a description to you?
That's a pretty good description of what the DAO is, yes.
And first of all, have you been paying attention to the DAO? Have you gotten involved? Do you know people that have gotten involved? Or are you watching from the sidelines? Are you watching with interest? Do you think it's a big farce? What's your initial take?
I think it's very interesting, and as you said, we know what the rules are, but we don't know how the game will be played. Like if you explain the rules of soccer or of American football to a child on a desert island who's never seen it, he might get an idea of what it takes to score a goal, but would have no idea actually how the players would strategize in getting that goal. And we don't know how honest players and dishonest players will try to operate inside the DAO. We don't have a complete, let's say, strategic understanding of how the members of the DAO will have to behave in order to safeguard their investment, how dishonest players will try to take advantage of it, although we already have seen some dishonest players and other individuals that we are still on the fence to determine whether they are dishonest or not. And all the attack vectors have not been identified, although a number have been identified apparently by, hope he will forgive me if he ever listens to this for mispronouncing his name, but Emin Singh, I'm not even going to try, but by somebody, let's say.
and this is one of the people involved with Ethereum or the DAO?
Yes, I think as academic, he's involved in cryptocurrency in general. And he's been quite critical of Bitcoin as well, somewhat recently, but not in an especially pessimistic or uselessly irrational way. So he's often been a voice of reason. I don't think it's stupid. I think it's a very interesting experiment. I think the other DAOs are very interesting experiments. I'm still not very convinced that even the people who are part of these DAOs or who organize these DAOs have a clear idea about how the DAOs themselves will make their rights against the contractors that they will hire to pursue their goals. How they will make sure that we not get the short end of the stick out of every transaction, since they don't have any legal recourse against them. And the most that they can do is simply to parcel out in a very small installments the money that is required to complete certain projects based on milestones, hoping that they will not get their intellectual property or their actual property stolen from them, or they will not get slowly ripped off. I'm a little bit skeptical by the DAO itself, which is the largest and biggest and most well-funded crowdsourcing campaign in history, apparently, in the sense that well, it was started to fund this Locket project, which is a somewhat interesting project, which might be a little bit too idealistic, but in the long run might actually turn out to actually turn a profit or to change the world if enough conditions apply. But it seems to have gathered approximately, but probably 20 to 30 more times they would have required, 20 to 30 more times more money than it would have required to fund that project itself. And now it seems to become a large investment vehicle for all the possible projects that there might be or not be in the ecosystem. Before the crowdfunding campaign started, I don't think that anybody, if I remember correctly, was discussing the DAO as a generic investment vehicle. They were discussing as a DAO, as a DAO whose funds would be used probably to accept a proposal received from Locket to create the Ethereum computer, and perhaps also something else. But nobody expected to receive vastly more money than would ever be required to actually fund that project, which they have. And now fundamentally they have to find a way to spend it or simply to keep it there. And that creates a lack of specific purpose in the organization that probably in the long run will create mismanagement issues, will create issues with misspent money. And yes.
Yeah, I don't know if history has ever seen this happen before, where a few lines of code on a computer have control over hundreds of millions of dollars, well, tens of millions of dollars, really, in assets. That's usually money is owned by an individual or some legal entity, and for now at least, money belongs to this computer code. That's pretty revolutionary, and the way that it was set up, they may not have expected to get that much money at first, but that much money has arrived in the coffers of this computer program, and there are certain rules that anyone who got involved had the ability to take a look at a priori as to how those funds would make it out. So now that there are vastly more funds than is necessary for the Locket project, I had an interview with one of the guys involved with Locket, Griff Green, the community manager, kind of the public face, and he was talking about this universal sharing network and this ability of the DAO to host and fund multiple projects besides Locket that kind of fit this ethos.
Yes.
But, when you wonder if there will be mismanagement, is it mismanagement within the code that was already written because they didn't anticipate this large tidal wave of inflow of capital?
No, not mismanagement in the code. Mismanagement in the sense that there's this theory according to which it is irrational for the average citizen to vote. Not to vote, but to inform himself on politics and then go and cast a vote. Because the marginal cost of doing so on its own part is greater than the possible benefit that the probability of affecting an election with his own votes might have. Nonetheless, people still do it because maybe they want to feel like they're contributing to their community, they want to feel like they're important or whatever else. I'm not saying that people should not go out and vote. I'm saying that the people who are purely rational would not vote if they were perfect rational machines.
Mm-hmm.
In a similar sense, the amount of effort that it takes for a shareholder in making decisions for a company is proportional to his shares of the company, so how much of it owns. So you might have some Apple stock, but you don't probably follow Apple news that frequently.
Right.
Even if in theory you probably could be able to send a letter somewhere and vote for somebody when the board of directors get elected. I don't know if it actually works that way with American stocks.
Yes. But this is a problem.
Yes.
The guy that started, BitShares, wrote a critique of this whole concept of the DAO, saying that it's impossible to anticipate how much people will participate, and it will be the participation that determines if these things are successful or not. And the wisdom of crowds might not show up in this case.
Yes, that's true. But let's make a comparison between Digix, for example, and the DAO. So Digix is a company that received more funds than it was anticipating, more funds than the DAO code allowed for. So they received $5 million over the course of 22, 23 hours, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. And it has one single purpose. It is very focused. They know what they have to do. And it is easy for I think, 2,000 to 3,000 people that invested in it, if I remember correctly, some of which own 10-15% of the entire DAO, to monitor that one operation. On the other hand, a much larger crowd invested in the DAO, and they invested in an organization that will probably handle several projects at the very least, and that will require, in order to be properly managed by its shareholders, a lot more eyeballs on a lot more projects. Mm-hmm. So from the point of view of the individual shareholder of the DAO, you own a lot less of it. So the less you own, the more irrational it becomes for you to pay attention to it. And the burden of paying attention to it increases as projects multiply. So it might just be that maybe 30, 35, or 40 people in the end will make all the decisions in the DAO, because we know that the Gini coefficient of the DAO is not very democratic in a sense. So very few people control a lot of it. But the lack of focus that there is between let's say the corporate structure and the project that it has would probably create mismanagement issues in the long run. I think it might actually be more rational in the long run. I'm not sure if this is possible, to simply divide the DAO in as many projects as it decides to fund with the $130 million it has. Mm-hmm. So interesting proposal comes along, and this guy wants $10 million for this project. Let's take $12 million worth of Ether out of the DAO, create a sub-DAO or another DAO whose tokens are all owned proportionally to the prorated to the ownership of the original DAO, mm-hmm. and make that an organization, so that the people that want to sell out those tokens to buy back in the original DAO can do it. People that want with new Ether buy into that DAO do it. So it seems to me like it would be a better way to structure the organization in the long run, so that yes.
Yeah. It seems to me that we need to hire some anthropologists or something to observe how people are going to behave in this new paradigm. You can write all the code you want, you can be as clever as you want, and people will do the damnedest things. We just don't know what will happen. I think we'll learn a lot, but if you're gonna bet on this first attempt being going off without a hitch, I think you're
absolutely, yes. But we're already seeing a number of problems. Like people have discovered that it takes 48 days to get your Ether out, but many people bought into it under the assumption that they click all the things on the MIST interface of your Ethereum wallet and get your money back. So they thought there would be a free lunch somewhere in there to make some easy money, especially from those people that would invest after the initial 2 weeks and buy at a higher rate than you have, which actually happened. So if you bought if you bought 100 Ethers worth of the DAO on the first day, yes, now you have 102 Ethers. So you made a 2% neat profit on that, but it would take you 2 months to get 2% out. So now, now on the DAO has been traded for a very short amount of time, but it's cheaper now to buy DAO tokens than it was during the pre-sales at a 10% discount. Mm-hmm. Because the people say, well, I'm going to cash out, something's fishy here, or this is not what I was in this for, and therefore I will cash out now. In fact, if anyone is listening and they have enough long-term stored ether that they don't plan to sell in the next couple of months. There's a fantastic arbitrage opportunity at the moment. Let's put the ether onto an exchange, buy DAO tokens with it, get it onto your own wallet, and then go through the whole process of getting your ether out, and you have a neat 10% profit over the course of 48 days. 10% profit, of course, in ether, not necessarily. It's not guaranteed to be the same value in a 48 days time. So that is one of the many problems that have been discovered with how the DAO actually works. And it has also to do with the fact that the sale had no roof, and it lasted for pretty much as long as it could have lasted for any reasonable and also unreasonable person to buy into it. So that all the capital that might have been invested into it has already been invested into it, and the only people that might still want to put money into it are the scalpers or the people that will perform the arbitrage to try to reconnect the value and bring it back to 100 against 1. Actually 102 against 1 at the moment. So, and this is just like after 3-4 days. Let's imagine all the other problems that would be with the DAO. Like a number of security problems have been discovered, and now there is a proposal to create a moratorium against all proposals until all these problems have been figured out. This despite the fact that the code was originally audited by this Lockheed team, by the third party hired by this Lockheed team, and they spent maybe $100,000 just in the auditing of the code. So we are 3 days into the actual DAO, and we already have all these problems. But I'm very pessimistic now, but there's a lot of potential there in general with decentralized autonomous organizations.
Well, I don't think it's particularly pessimistic. I mean, this is a 1.0 thing. I mean, anyone who's in technology knows that right out of the chute. I mean, it's really, even if the code is stable, the social experiment that it is can't be anything but beta, maybe even anything but alpha, and so it's just a fascinating spectator sport at this point. And I think, for those who invested a little bit, I think it'll be really interesting. Hopefully, if it doesn't succeed, people aren't losing too much. But a little bit makes the whole thing very interesting to keep track of. And, even if the whole thing goes down in flames, I think, first of all, it'll be fascinating and fun to talk about, which, I love to do all the time. And
it might be a new Mt. Gox though if it all goes down in flame, in the sense that it's a pity that 150 million was invested in it, like for the first really big DAO, in the sense that and it was reported so widely in the mainstream press that an autonomous organization received $150 million, that if it comes flaming down like the Hindenburg in a few months' time for whichever reason, maybe even just a bug in the code, that might have a depressing effect on the Ethereum ecosystem comparable to what Mt. Gox had on Bitcoin in 2013.
Well, but just like Mt. Gox, I mean, Bitcoin survived. It might take one on the chin, but I think it's an idea that time has come. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It might be delayed by a little bit, so it might kind of depress for some time the sentiment around the Ethereum, dApps, smart contracts, and everything else. Like, you have a $150 million smart contracts that has a bug in it, and everybody loses everything. And probably Ether goes down in price back to 0.5 against the US dollar.
Yeah.
And that would have a significant depressing effect on the Ethereum economy.
Well, so all of us in crypto are used to being the turd in the punch bowl at the cocktail party. Like, it's okay if this thing goes down in flames. We can survive. I'll still be a fan no matter what happens.
I agree. Well, crypto cannot be uninvented, so we might bungle it 1,000 times in the future, but eventually it will be gotten right, and we will learn from experience. Maybe I think it was just too big of a gamble too early for this type of project. Right. But then again, nobody decided the cap. It was just the overall jackpot of the DAO was something that was organized autonomously by a large number of individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, listen, man, I love to
Gotta go.
have I love to have your brain on these topics. We really miss having you around here in Bali, and well,
I
it's
hope I
really
come back. I hope I come back in about 6 weeks, but I think you'll be gone by then. I've
yes,
spent
yes,
most of June in Italy.
yes. I'm going to be traveling a little bit this summer, but I think I'm going to be doing more and more of this virtual meeting stuff. So really just trying to keep the ball rolling no matter where I am. And now that we've been doing this for a couple of years, there are interesting people all over the world. So hopefully we can just keep in touch and keep doing
Definitely.
stuff like this. I know there's going to be more soap opera, popcorn-worthy things happening in crypto. Also, I've written down all of your predictions about the Dow and Bitcoin. So when those things don't come out quite right, hopefully I'll get another chance to remind you that you were wrong.
I was wrong. Yes.
But yes, I really do appreciate you making a little bit of time for us down here on our little tropical island with the coconuts, kind of on the periphery
It was my pleasure.
of all the major Bitcoin happenings. But anyway, it's been fun, and let's do this again. Are you up for doing this again? Maybe I don't know, a few weeks, few months
Next.
from
Well, I'm not sure if you want to do it as a weekly thing or as a monthly thing or whenever there's enough stuff to talk about. I would be.
Yes, I'd love to do this on a regular basis. I think that's a great idea.
If you want to do it next week, let's do it next week.
Okay, all right. Well,
Yes.
again, thanks for joining. I know that you just got off of something like a 33-hour flight, so thanks for
Yes.
jumping on with me to talk a little bit about this stuff. And yes, we'll get something on the calendar and we'll put it up on the Facebook group for the next time, so maybe people can tune in live next time around.
Sure. My pleasure.
All right, Andrea. We'll take care and we'll see you next time.
See you soon, Gary.
Okay.
Hi to everyone. We would fundamentally have a halving of the number of transactions that can be performed. This would be a situational crisis. People would probably try to scramble for the doors. Lots of money that has been deposited in cold storage wallets would come out and try to get onto exchanges, but it cannot get into exchanges because the network is working at half capacity. That would probably cause the price to tumble even further. The price tumble even further, more hashing power comes out from the network. More hashing power comes out from the network, and more people scramble to sell. The price goes lower and lower, the block times get longer and longer, and there would be a point where we never again find another block. And that would be the end of it. And
Right.
that is a problem that is catalyzed by the halving right now, but it is a problem that we only started having since blocks became full. Because when you have full blocks, any circumstance that might cause a significant percentage of the hashing power to drop off the network might trigger this type of scenario. Not necessarily the halving, maybe even just the halving of the price of Bitcoin for whichever reason. Say that China bans Bitcoin tomorrow or in 5 months' time, and quite drastically moves to make it impossible for people to buy and sell and transact with it. And even if it did not shut down the miners, so they kept them in place, that might cause the price of Bitcoin to go up by 50%. If that happened, the same scenario would verify itself that we would see doing any halving. So having a full blocks with unadjustable block size creates this type of catastrophic scenario at any given time if a sufficient amount of the hashing power goes offline. Of course, we don't know how things will play out, but it seems pretty reasonable from a game theory perspective to imagine that this is what would ultimately happen if we had under the circumstances. And the halving is the most perfect, more predictable future event of this event possibly occurring.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I've been reminding people lately of is the last halving. Most people weren't paying attention to Bitcoin the last time we had a halving day, and
yes.
obviously, obviously the circumstances are different now. But one thing that was interesting, we started off this discussion with price, and in anticipation of the last halving, we did not see a commensurate price increase in the weeks and months leading into the halving day. because there was a lot of uncertainty on what would happen to Bitcoin. I mean, we had never experienced this before. We didn't know how the miners would react. We didn't know how the ecosystem would react. You know, we knew how the code worked, but we didn't know how real people with real Bitcoin and with real mining equipment would react to the halving. And once it was clear that the halving went off without a hitch, that's when we saw a major price increase, orders of magnitude price increase in the, you know, within 4 to 6 weeks after the successful halving took place. So if we do weather this storm, if we avoid the death spiral, if mining goes on and Bitcoin survives this halving day, do we see a precipitous rise in the price after the halving?
Personally, I don't think so. Like certainly, I do have some Bitcoin, so I would like that to be the case. But I think that the era of large, significant short-term price swings, like price goes up tenfold over the course of weeks or a couple of months, is over. I would like to be proven wrong, obviously, but that does not seem to be the case. I think there are a number of differences compared to 2012 in the fact that the mining is a lot more like a business right now than it was before, in the hands of specialized entities, which have very often razor-sharp margins. I do not remember 2012 because I was not around, but from what I read, the mining at the time was a lot more a mom-and-pop operation, only that it was something that you did in your dorm at university, or something that could be done with spare graphic cards or maybe the first ASICs. So it was probably less responsive to very fine-tuned market pressures. Another difference is that in 2012, the market capitalization of Bitcoin was very limited, and when you have a very small market capitalization, especially with no traders, no experienced traders, no short spur on the price, something that would be very difficult for them to agree on in the long run, but can be agreed upon for several weeks in the face of an event that could be catastrophic for a large number of them. So these are a number of guys that know that if the price doesn't jump twofold over the next few weeks, much of the operations might have to be shut down or retraced, or that even if they're perfectly successful, players like Antpool or BTCC would find their market share increased in the ecosystem to such extent that would devalue the Bitcoin network, since they would become 40, 45, maybe even 50% of the overall hashing power. This is at the level of the conspiracy plus. Like, it's not that much of a theory, but it's conceivable that for the moment, 4 or 5 players, much like they agreed to get them together in a room a few months ago to discuss scaling proposals, they also have agreed to give a little bump to the Bitcoin price. The price is, yes.
Yeah, well, you know, you mentioned in one of your more astute comments recently on the Bitcoins in Bali group that Bitcoin may have realized its MySpace moment, or jumped the shark, or its best days are behind it. And you know, if the miners are truly able to collude on price at this time, I mean, that doesn't bode very well for Bitcoin, does it? If that collusion on price is possible?
No, but there are a lot of people that are worried that the fact that we have 6 or 7 mining cartels could be a problem for Bitcoin. But many of these people are people that left the ecosystem when this became the case. I could make a few names right now, like James D'Angelo. I'm not sure if I'm naming him correctly. He was very interesting a few years back, and now he kind of lost interest. And he, without making an exit like Mike Hearn, he also claimed that the Bitcoin experiment has probably failed. So yeah, the fact that the number of miners can get together in a room and determine fundamental aspects of how the ecosystem operates is really dramatic. I think it's less of a problem if they do it in terms of fixing the price than it is if they do it in terms of agreeing to fork the network surreptitiously, or change the order of the transaction, which is their main function, to benefit themselves, to fundamentally perform 51% attacks. if they do it simply by limiting the supply of Bitcoin that they put onto the market, they are simply doing that in their capacity as market players, not in their capacity as miners. If they perform a 50%, 51% attack, they do that in their capacity as miners. So it's a little more dramatic, but it's still pretty, well, it doesn't bode well for the ecosystem. But for the moment, it might actually be the thing that saves Bitcoin, at least for the short run, if they actually do collude and do fix the price, and they do solve the problem that we might get to talk about in a few minutes' time if you get to it, the problem of the catastrophic failure, the death spiral.
Yes. Well, I think this is as good a time as any to talk about that, and I'll just describe it quickly for the sake of those people that maybe aren't familiar with this doomsday scenario that you're talking about. I mean, essentially what it involves is a very high difficulty level reached at a certain point, then the halving taking place and a mass defection from the miners who can no longer be profitable at the current hash rate and the current Bitcoin price. If it doesn't double, yet the block reward cuts in half, presumably that will change the profitability of vast swaths of the mining resources. And then if you've got half the people mining with a difficulty that's really at its peak, at Bitcoin's peak difficulty in its entire lifetime, then maybe we never find the next block. Is that the scenario as you understand it?
Yeah, it's very similar. So as you said, the idea is that the half of the hashing power goes out of well, it's taken out suddenly or over the course of several hours, but it takes 2 weeks for the difficulty to adjust itself.
Mm-hmm.
But which means that for a space of 2 weeks, blocks would move to 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. On average. 50% went off, 50% of the capacity went offline. But we have a clogged network because we have a 1 megabyte limit for each block, which means that
one another and a lot of uncertainty. I think we mentioned towards the top that that China recently devalued their currency in response to some things coming out of the Fed. Janet Yellen making some hawkish remarks in a press conference. And so, yes, I don't even know if Bitcoin would be around if it wasn't for the bad behavior of everybody else in the world. And it seems like that bad behavior is coming to a head, but maybe that's just because I'm paying too close attention. What do you think?
I think that I've been waiting for a market downturn for quite a while now, as many people have. I don't think that I'm making very strange prediction when I say that, and you agree with me also. It will probably come. When it comes, it will probably be good for Bitcoin in terms of price, in terms of value. I don't think it will help break Bitcoin into the mainstream in the short term or in the medium term or even in the course of a couple of years. I think that assuming that Bitcoin never became a reserve currency, that it became a hard asset like gold to hold on to in times of crisis, I think that just for the time that institutions take to adapt to novelty or to new things, it would take at least 10 years for that to be the case. I think that if there was another crisis, the pool of people that are interested in the currency, the pool of specialists or a pool of very wealthy people that are interested in the currency and the experiment and in Bitcoin as an asset would increase probably significantly, but I don't think there would be a paradigm shift anytime soon. Mm-hmm. There's nonetheless an undeniable correlation between crisis in the outside world and price in the Bitcoin world. Yeah. But I think it has more to do with the consequences of there's a very simple game or a simple scenario in a game theory that goes more or less something like this. You get a crowd of 100 people and you tell them, pick a number from 0 to 100. After you're done picking a number, we will see what is the average number that has been picked, and the number that is 2/3 that will win. So if you play this game with a generic crowd who has never played the game before, most people would say, I don't know, 40 or 35 or 38 or 37. Mm-hmm. And in the end, the winner of the first round would be somewhere around 30 or 25 to 30. But then if you play the game again, for the second round, the winner is around 16. And if you play the game again, the winner is a 7 or 8 or 9. So the more you play this game, the more people learn how to guess each other's responses to reactions. So I think that the response that Bitcoin has to the Bitcoin price has to troubles in the outside world has a lot to do with exactly this. So having learned that the people buy when they hear bad news, other people try to buy also when they hear bad news, trying to capitalize on that. Whether the price increase remains over time or not is not certain. It seems to remain, but to remain there to some extent. They don't sell immediately after the bad news is gone.
So what you're saying is when we enter into this death spiral, there's going to be plenty of people to buy my Bitcoin from me, before the whole thing tanks.
No, I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to tank. I'm saying that there's a correlation between the negative events in the markets and Bitcoin price. But I don't think it has to do with the fact that that more value flows into Bitcoin as a long-term longevity consideration about what's the best thing to do with my money on the part of a large group of people, but based on the expectations that the Bitcoin price will go up before catastrophes or before the Katrina 2 or before the next financial crisis.
Right.
The long run, it might actually, as in, if Bitcoin ever became successful as a reserve currency, which I honestly, I'm not sure if it will, and it might. I wouldn't put my money on it, but I think it will become a currency of the internet if it succeeds in going past certain stumbling blocks. It might be that in a scenario that I don't find very interesting right now, because I'm more interested in Bitcoin as a technology than as a currency. In a future scenario, it might actually be the case that in the same way in which gold goes up when the markets go down, Bitcoin will go up directly as markets go down, not as a second, third, fourth degree consideration upon what other people.
All right. I think we are live here. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to a supplemental episode of The Filter. Every week we sit down here in Bali in the jungle, in the sweltering heat, to talk about Bitcoin. We have that weekly meeting, but in between weekly meetings, we post a bunch of stories to our Facebook group, the Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. And then when we get together in person, we have something to talk about. And over the months and now years that we've been doing this, we get a lot of smart people that roll through, and we often have very interesting conversations about the news of the day. But being Bali, it's a little bit transient, and sometimes those really smart people, they move on to their other projects, or their vacation is over, or they're just on to other things. But one particularly astute commentator that we've had here recently, but not very recently, is our good friend Andrea. And I've asked Andrea to jump on board and talk about some of the news of the day, like we used to do when we were in the same place. We're not in the same place anymore, but through the magic of the interwebs, we can get together. So let me bring him on board here if I can. Andrea, can you hear me?
Hi, Gary. Nice to speak to you.
Hello, hello. Nice to see you. Where are you these days?
At the moment, I'm in Verona, Italy. I just arrived here about an hour ago.
Ah, Verona, Italy. That's where Romeo and Juliet are from, right?
That is correct. And myself as well.
Ah, and you. Yes.
Thanks for the introduction. Too kind, by the way.
We had a great time when you were in town. I'm glad that you're even after your transcontinental globetrotting, you've still got enough energy here to talk about Bitcoin. So let's do it.
I hope I won't drop in and out like a Grandpa Simpson in the middle of a conversation due to the jet lag. I'll do my best.
We can always blame the internet in Bali if anything bad
happens.
All right. Well, where to start? There's, when we were talking before the call started, you're saying that it might be kind of a boring conversation if we had done this like 7 or 10 days ago, but lately things are cooking. The thing everyone really wants to talk about, at least at first, is the price. And since we all last got together here in Bali, the price has gone up well over 10%. And the big question is why. You have any thoughts on what's going on with the price?
I think it's too early to tell. Normally, when there are price movements, the only reasonable thing to do is to do a post-mortem a few months later. So when the price went up 6 months ago, everybody was speculating about whether it was Chinese buying pressure, the MMM, or whatever it was called, pyramid scheme, whether there was fear of panic of this or that in Argentina, Venezuela, whichever other countries. There were a number of reasons that were being bandied about. It was also the fact that Bitcoin was becoming again more popular thanks to all the front pages on The Economist and I cannot remember which other magazines. And now we know that more or less to simply increase buying pressure on the part of the Chinese. The same seems to be occurring right now in the sense that as it happened a while back, the Chinese exchanges normally lead the charge for new price increases, and the Western exchanges simply close in with arbitrage. But there seems to be clear buying pressure on the Asian side from that point of view.
Yeah, there seems to be a bunch of things kind of coalescing to affect the price these days. There's the whole thing about China. I think also the Chinese just devalued their currency, which could have something to do with it. And we've also got the Bitcoin halving coming down the pike, which is a factor, I think, in how people are trading. It's
certainly, yes. But the halving has a very mixed effect on the price, and we might talk about this immediately later because we agreed to talk about the possibility of a catastrophic failure scenario for Bitcoin with the halving. But yes, that is another possibility. Something that I've been reading recently as a more or less wild speculation on Reddit is the possibility that there is a cartel between the miners to artificially decrease now the supply of the Bitcoins that enters the market, to artificially, at the moment, give a spring, no longing, no leverage for trading. It is very easy to have wild price swings, and it is much easier to go from a market cap of $10 million to $100 million than it is to go from $8 billion like right now to $80 billion. I think that if we got to $80 billion, and if there was if we got to a price of $80 billion right now, a very significant amount of the people that hold Bitcoin right now would simply not call it quits, but would say that they have already achieved fuck your money and I can get out into something that is more safe, but they can guarantee their wealth in the long run better than with Bitcoin, which is a very volatile asset, or at least would say that they've gotten what they were in for. So I would find it very difficult to have that price to sustain in the long run. Also, as I mentioned very often to people that hope that the price will increase significantly very briefly, even with this year, with the coming halving, in order to support a price of, let's say, $10,000 per Bitcoin, which I don't think is attainable for a number of years, there would have to be billions of dollars poured into the ecosystems every day. I cannot do the math right now. I had done it in the past. We know that right now at the price of $450 or $500, whenever we last did the calculation, and with the current block reward, it would have taken, I think, $300 to $400 million a year poured into the ecosystem to keep the price stable. And it would be exponentially more so, or increasingly more so, as the price increases, adding zeros to itself. So if you had the price of, assuming that it takes $400 million to maintain the price stable at the current condition, at the current price point, if we have the block reward, but we increase the price tenfold or 20-fold, it would take $400 million divided by 2 times 10, so $2 billion to maintain the price stable. So it would have to be consistent, constant increased interest in the currency to have to sustain the price. With the current inflation schedule, that is not possible. We still have a very generous block reward, which does not just subsidize mining, but it over-secures the network by a factor of maybe tenfold what would be required to keep things stable right now. So I find it very unlikely that this will remain, that the price will stabilize at a very high level. There might be another bubble, but as it was seen in 2013, eventually the prices would eventually go down. We also have a lot of foresight from the previous bubbles. We have seen that every rapid increase in value in Bitcoin is normally followed by a depreciation that either takes one day, like from when it went from 30 to 1, or that takes around a year from when it went from 1,200 to 200. So the markets are more mature. There's a lot more speculators, very cynical speculators that don't have any reason to believe that Bitcoin will become the new gold standard, new reserve currency.
They're not sentimental like me. They're not sentimental.
Exactly.
Fanatics.
They don't care. It is much easier right now to be a cynical player in the Bitcoin ecosystem than it was 4 years ago. And these people add rationality to the price. They also stabilize it a lot, but they stabilize it a lot in both directions, especially thanks to the presence of leverage, which makes it possible for people that maybe do not want to invest a lot of capital to multiply their, well, if they have more intelligence or more trading skills than they have money, skilled traders can can affect the market more than other players thanks to leverage. And a lot of people have been following the ecosystem in the last few years that do just that. And for that reason, I don't think there would be a phenomenal price increase.
Now, of course,
yes.
The wild card in all of this, I mean, I agree with you if we're living in a vacuum.
Yes.
But there is a geopolitical climate, a macro environment that is kind of crazy. Lots of things going on in the world, a lot of geopolitical uncertainty, a lot of currency wars.
Yes.
Major currencies fluctuating wildly against